The sun was setting behind the dusty mountains of Arizona, painting the sky with orange and gold. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and the distant sound of horses. Among the rocks and sand, a young Apache woman named Ayanna moved quietly, her eyes sharp, her heart racing. She had been running for hours. Her village had scattered after a surprise raid, and now she was alone, tired, thirsty, and afraid. Ayanna's long dark hair was tangled from the wind. Her feet were bleeding from walking barefoot on the sharp stones. She didn't know where to go. The land was wide and cruel, and she had no food or water left. As she climbed up a small hill, she saw smoke far away. Maybe it was a campfire. Maybe someone could help. But maybe it was a trap. She hesitated. As the night fell, she felt weak and sat behind a cactus. She looked at the stars and whispered a prayer in her native tongue. She missed her mother and her little brother. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Great Spirit," she whispered, "show me a path." Hours later, she heard the soft sound of horse hooves. Her heart jumped. She hid behind the cactus, holding her breath. A tall man on a horse came into view, his hat low over his face, his rifle hanging by his side. His clothes were dusty and he looked tired. He stopped and looked around, his blue eyes scanning the ground. He had noticed footprints, hers. Ayanna froze. She thought, he's a white man. A cowboy. If he finds me, he'll kill me. She crouched lower, hoping he would ride away. But the man slowly got off his horse and walked toward the cactus. His steps were calm but sure. When he reached the spot, he saw her. Ayanna gasped and tried to run, but she was too weak. She fell to the ground. The man quickly stepped closer, holding up his hands. "Hey, easy there," he said softly. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Ayanna didn't understand his words fully, but his tone wasn't angry. Still, she pushed herself back, scared. He noticed her fear. He knelt down and put his gun aside. "My name's Luke," he said slowly, pointing to himself. "Luke," she looked at him, trembling. "Ayanna," she whispered. He smiled slightly, repeating, "Ayanna." Luke noticed how pale and tired she was. Her lips were dry and her hands shook. Without saying much, he opened his saddlebag and pulled out a water flask. He placed it on the ground and stepped back, showing he meant no harm. She hesitated, but then crawled forward and took the flask. The first sip burned her dry throat, but soon she drank deeply. Luke watched quietly. He knew the Apache and cowboys didn't trust each other. But something about this woman's eyes, so full of fear yet strength, made him want to help. He pointed toward his horse and said slowly, "Camp. Food." Then he gestured to her, asking her to come. Ayanna didn't know if she could trust him. But the night was cold and her legs were shaking. She looked at the dark sky and then at the man. Finally, she nodded. He helped her onto his horse, careful not to scare her. The horse snorted softly as Luke climbed up behind her. They rode silently through the desert night, the stars shining above them. After some time, they reached a small campsite near a stream. A fire burned gently and there was a pot of beans simmering. Luke helped her down and offered her a blanket. She sat near the fire, the warmth slowly bringing color back to her face. Luke cooked quietly, giving her space. He placed a small plate in front of her and said, "Eat." She looked at him, unsure, then slowly began to eat. Every bite felt like life returning to her body. They didn't talk much, but their eyes met often. She could see kindness in his face, something rare in this harsh land. Luke noticed how strong she looked despite her pain. Her spirit hadn't broken. After they ate, Luke fixed the fire and said softly, "You safe here. Rest." Ayanna watched him for a while. He didn't sleep right away. He sat by the fire looking at the stars, keeping guard. For the first time in days, she felt a small sense of safety. Her eyes grew heavy and she finally slept. In the morning, the sun rose over the desert, turning the sand golden. Ayanna woke to the smell of coffee. Luke was already up, feeding his horse. He turned and smiled. "Morning." She smiled shyly in return, her fear slowly fading. He pointed at the stream nearby. "Water," he said, handing her a small cloth. She understood and went to wash her face. When she returned, Luke was packing his things. He looked at her and asked gently, "You got people? Family?" She hesitated and pointed north where her village used to be, her eyes filled with tears. Luke nodded, understanding. "We'll go," he said. Together they began their journey through the desert. The road was not easy. They faced heat, dust storms, and long days of riding. But Luke always made sure she had water and food. He taught her some English words: son, horse, and friend. She taught him a few Apache words in return. Slowly, a strange friendship began to form between them. At night, they shared stories by the fire. Luke told her about his life as a cowboy, how he worked on ranches, how lonely the desert could be. Ayanna shared memories of her family and how she loved the sound of drums during her tribe's dances. One evening, as the wind blew softly and the sky turned purple, Luke said quietly, "You're brave." "Ayanna." She looked at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. "You good man," she said slowly in broken English. He smiled, touched by her words. He didn't know why, but he felt something deep in his heart, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Days turned into weeks as they traveled together. Ayanna's strength returned. She started smiling more, sometimes even laughing. Luke began to realize that the woman he had found in the desert wasn't just a survivor. She was someone special. One afternoon, a storm came. The wind roared and rain poured down like never before. They found shelter in an old cabin near the hills. Inside, Luke made a fire and gave Ayanna his coat. She looked at him and said softly, "Why you help me?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because I couldn't leave you to die out there. Nobody deserves that." She nodded, her eyes misty. She didn't say anything, but deep inside her heart began to trust him. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, they sat near the fire in silence. The storm outside was wild, but inside that small cabin there was peace. Two souls from different worlds drawn together by fate and kindness. When the morning came, the storm had passed. The sun shone again, bright and warm. Ayanna stepped outside and looked at the desert stretching endlessly ahead. She felt free, but no longer alone. Luke walked up beside her, smiling. "Ready to move on?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "With you?" And as they rode away together into the golden light, neither of them knew how their journey would end. But both knew that something had begun. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Ayanna and Luke traveled together across the wide plains through red canyons and golden fields. The wild land was full of challenges, but somehow, with each new sunrise, they grew closer. Ayanna was not the scared woman she once was. She had learned to ride better, to speak more English, and even to help Luke with the ranch work when they stopped at small towns. Luke, on the other hand, found himself smiling more than ever before. The quiet woman from the desert had brought peace to his restless heart. One morning, they reached a small town called Dust Creek. It was a simple place with wooden houses, a blacksmith and a saloon that stood at the corner of the dirt road. As they rode in, people stopped and stared. It was rare to see a cowboy and an Apache woman traveling together. Some looked curious, others whispering among themselves. Ayanna noticed the looks. She felt uneasy, pulling her shawl closer around her shoulders. Luke saw it too. He leaned toward her and said softly, "Don't mind them. They don't know you like I do." She nodded quietly, trusting him. Luke found work at a small ranch just outside the town. The owner, Mr. Collins, was a kind old man who needed help with his horses. Luke agreed to stay for a few months. Ayanna helped Mrs. Collins in the kitchen and garden. For the first time in a long while, she slept in a real bed and felt part of something again. Every evening, Luke and Ayanna would sit outside the cabin watching the sunset. The sky would turn orange and pink, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Luke would sometimes play a small harmonica, and Ayanna would hum softly to the tune. One evening, as they sat together, Luke said quietly, "You ever think about staying somewhere?" "For good?" Ayanna looked at him surprised. "You mean, not travel?" "Yes," he said with a smile. "Maybe have a little house, some horses, a place where you don't have to run anymore." Ayanna thought for a moment. The idea felt strange but peaceful. "With you?" she asked softly. Luke's eyes met hers. "If you'll have me," he said gently. She didn't answer right away, but the warmth in her eyes said more than words ever could. A few weeks later, life took an unexpected turn. A man from the town came to the ranch one morning. His name was Tom Briggs, a rancher with sharp eyes and a cold tone. He looked at Luke and said, "Heard you've got an Apache woman working here." Luke stood straight, his voice calm. "She's with me." Tom frowned. "That's so, folks in town are talking. Ain't right, some say." Luke's jaw tightened. "She's done nothing wrong," Tom shrugged. "Maybe not. But people don't like what they don't understand. After the man left, Luke looked worried. He didn't want trouble, especially not for Ayanna. That evening, he told her what had happened. She listened quietly, her face thoughtful. "Maybe. We go," she said softly. Luke looked at her. "You sure? You like it here?" She nodded slowly. "If they don't want me, then I don't want to stay. The land is big. We find another place." Luke felt a deep respect for her courage. She had lost everything once before, yet she still faced life with strength. He knew then that no matter where they went, as long as they were together, they would be all right. They left Dust Creek the next morning. The sky was clear and the open road stretched before them. Ayanna rode beside Luke, her hair dancing in the wind. She no longer looked like a woman running from fear. She looked like someone who had found her purpose. After days of travel, they came upon a wide valley filled with tall grass and a river that sparkled under the sun. Luke stopped his horse and smiled. "What do you think?" he asked. Ayanna looked around. The place was quiet, surrounded by hills and wildflowers. She smiled softly. "Beautiful," she whispered. Luke nodded. "Then this is it. Our home." They built a small cabin near the river. Luke worked hard cutting wood, while Ayanna gathered wild herbs and berries. She decorated the cabin with small handmade items, woven mats, clay pots, and painted symbols that reminded her of her tribe. Every evening they would cook together, laugh together, and watch the stars. Carly, their little home became a symbol of two worlds meeting, the cowboy and the Apache woman, united by kindness and fate. One afternoon, Luke went to the nearest town to buy supplies. He returned with something wrapped in cloth. Ayanna was outside washing clothes by the river when he called her name. "Ayanna," he said softly, walking toward her. She looked up, smiling. "You come back early." He nodded and opened the cloth. Inside was a simple silver ring. It wasn't fancy, but it shone in the sunlight. Ayanna gasped softly, her hands covering her mouth. "Luke, what is this?" He smiled gently. "It's something I've been thinking about for a while." He took her hand and said, "You came into my life when I least expected it. I thought I was just helping someone in need, but you gave me more than I can ever repay. You gave me peace." Ayanna's eyes filled with tears. He continued, "I don't care what the world thinks. You're my heart, Ayanna. Will you be my wife?" She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shimmering in the sunlight. Then she nodded slowly, whispering, "Yes, Luke, I will." Luke smiled, slipping the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. The wind blew softly through the valley as if the world itself was blessing their union. Their life together wasn't always easy. There were dry seasons when water ran low, storms that damaged their fences, and long winters when the nights felt endless. But through it all, they stood side by side. Luke taught Ayanna how to read and write a little. She taught him the ways of the land, how to find water, how to listen to the wind, and how to understand nature. Together they blended two worlds into one. In time, they became known among travelers as the couple of the river valley. Some who passed by were surprised to see a cowboy and an Apache woman living in harmony, but most left with quiet respect in their eyes. Ayanna often sat by the river at sunset, watching the golden light dance on the water. Luke would come up behind her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She would smile and say, "Remember the desert?" He'd chuckle, "Hard to forget. That's where I found my heart." Years passed and their love grew deeper. They planted a small garden, raised a few animals, and built a life full of simple joys. Ayanna's laughter filled the cabin, and Luke's calm presence made her feel safe. Sometimes they visited nearby towns, and though some people still whispered, most had learned to accept them. Time had softened the hearts that once judged. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Luke sat outside, polishing his saddle. Ayanna came out with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and sat beside him. "Do you ever wish your life had gone differently?" she asked softly. Luke shook his head, smiling. "Not a single thing. Every step led me to you." Ayanna leaned her head on his shoulder. The air was warm, filled with the scent of wildflowers. The world around them was quiet and peaceful. She whispered, "I thought you were going to kill me the day we met." Luke laughed gently. "And I thought you were going to run forever." They both smiled, remembering that night in the desert when fear had brought them together. Now, years later, love had taken its place. As the stars filled the night sky, Ayana looked up and whispered a small prayer in her native tongue, a prayer of gratitude, for the man who had saved her, for the peace they had built, and for the love that had grown between two people from different worlds. And there, under the endless Wild West sky, the cowboy and the Apache woman sat side by side, no longer strangers, no longer lost, but partners for life, bound by the strength of kindness and the power of love.